From Los Angeles, California, welcome to CGSociety. We're joined today by Nick Hiatt, who is a art director, matte painter, and concept artist. And
Uh,
go ahead.
How's it going, everybody? Thanks for tuning in.
So before we get into your history, I want to talk about this for a moment. I have to say, this is one of the best headshots that I've ever seen in my life. And I've just watched about 20 photography videos, so that's saying a lot. So what's going on here? I literally had to figure out for a moment if this was actually you or if this was a model. Like I couldn't, it literally took about 5 minutes to be like, okay, is this an actual photograph he's trying to make look like a model, or is this a model he's trying to make look like a photograph to be funny? Like, which?
Well, it's a combination of the two, depending on which lie you believe. Everyone started to say it looked 3D, so I just went along with it and said it was a photo scan. But truth be told, it's not. It's my buddy and business partner Zach Mant and some of his photo equipment, and he got some new camera gear and flashes, and I said, well, leave him over here and let me check it out. And yeah, that's so I guess really, that's what happens when you have great quality equipment and an ugly model. It can make even me look good.
It looks great, man. It's funny. I'd love to see you guys grow your own studio and just do company wide headshots like that. It is funny though. Good equipment. You know, I agree with you because I haven't done photography in my life at all, and within like a 1 year period, got a lot of really decent equipment, good equipment. I think the best investment I made was the ProPhoto strobe lights with a beauty dish, which you can put on any human individual and it will make them look beautiful. It's like a $400 metal bowl, but it's totally worth it. And I actually use those things in V-Ray now as textures. Awesome. And it makes the lighting amazing. So one of the things that we want to talk to you today about, obviously, to start out with, let's introduce everybody to kind of the art direction, the matte painting, the concept art that you do for your day job. And then we can transition into some of the cool photography and travel that you're doing in kind of modern time right now.
Great. Sounds good.
So just tell us a little bit about what you do and where you work and kind of how you got there.
Well, I'm a art director, matte painter, concept artist based out of LA. I've been in LA for around 16 years, doing the same thing for around 18, I guess. I went to school in Fort Lauderdale and moved out to LA in 2002 for my first job at Rhythm & Hues as a texture artist, because I could not get work as a matte painter because of two reasons, I guess. I had no portfolio and my skills weren't quite up to par. So my first foray into the industry was a texture painter because it was much easier to get a job. And while I was making money, I could train at night for matte painting gigs, and I could also start to build my network. So that was a great intro level job for me, texture painting, because it easily transitioned into matte painting and allowed me to get money and more importantly, a network going. So now I worked in the studios for around, I would say, 6 years, from Sony ImageWorks, Rhythm & Hues, Digital Domain, and I popped around town for a little bit until I had enough contacts and enough enough steel to try and start my own company, which was my end goal to begin with. So around 2000 and I guess 7 or so, I started my own company, and it specialized in concept art and matte painting. And over the years, I've just kind of developed that and slowly built my clientele, built my friendship base, and built my networking skills over the year here in LA. And now that's kind of my bread and butter, is all freelance through my little shop of 2 or 3 artists who we hire freelance, and we swell based on project size right now.
And are you guys based primarily on film? Do you do commercial, game? Does it you take on anything? Is it just a general outsourcing studio, or how's it set up?
We are equal opportunity pixel horse. so we will work on whatever. I would say it's probably a good split in thirds in between games, film, and TV.
Right.
Currently in TV, we're working on Fox's The Orville season 2. We did around 40 paintings for season 1. And a lot of concept art as well. I did a lot of ship design and a lot of space station design for the Orville, and we're going to be doing season 2 right now. So that's currently what we're ramping into season 2, The Orville, and then we have a Netflix show that we're working on that I can't say very much about.
Sure.
And then hopefully 2 other projects that are going to land really soon that will be super awesome and should carry us through the middle of the year if all goes well.
So Orville seems like a fun project for the studio to work in. So,
It is. It's super fun.
so one of the things that you just mentioned that I've always been a little bit curious about because I've never done it. I'm playing a little bit with environment concept now, but I've got a lot of friends that were great texture artists in film and transitioned into matte painting. And I always wondered if that was how easy of a transition it is, or if it just from an outsider's point of view seems easy. What things from textures kind of help you? Is there anything from being a texture artist that hurts you going into matte painting?
No, I think the only potential downside, and this is, again, this is minimal, it's just me trying to find a downside,
Right.
is you may be looked at as a texture painter and not a matte painter. But that would just last for the first little bit. Like I think that was my only thing, was when I first started texture painting, my network knew me as a texture painter, right? And my whole goal was to bridge into matte painting. I just needed the chops, and I needed the experience. So eventually what happened is I was texture painting on a show called Surf's Up. It's an animated show at Sony. And they needed a matte painting. And I said, I kept begging and begging, and I got my first matte painting. And by that time I had been, pretty much matte painting every single night at home, downloading whatever DVDs existed at the time, which I think back in the day, it was really only Dylan Cole's DVDs that were out, because this is 2003. So I've essentially watched Dylan's DVDs like 12 times. And I would just train at night. And by the time I got my first shot, I was good enough to do a decent enough job to where I could just transition at that point and kept rolling. So again, I think the 2 big benefits are, it's entry level is easier to achieve as a texture painter, and you're making money, which is number 2, which let's be honest, we all need that.
Right.
And yeah, exactly, especially in LA. And 3 is you get to build your network. So this is a great transition thing. It's just, you can't expect to be a texture painter and boom, I'm going to be a matte painter because this is how it is. No, you have to truly put in the work and get it going, and put in the time that it requires to be a matte painter. Because matte painting, at least in my mind, I could be biased, but I probably am biased, but matte painting to me is probably the most difficult skill set to master, because you have to know a little bit of everything. You have to know lighting, you have to know texturing, you have to know shading and materials, you have to know layout and design, you have to know concept design, because you need to design your shots. And there's a ton of nuance that goes with matte painting that I'm not trying to downplay other disciplines, because some modelers are insanely talented, for instance, but it's just matte painting. You kind of need to know a little bit of everything.
Well,
and
I would,
to be good, you have to master. Yeah, I'm pretty much done. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, with other pipeline positions in production, we always comment, for example, character modeling. It's very rare that a studio gives you the opportunity to take a character model to 100%, unless you're working for a studio that's got the bankroll to be able to spend the time and the delivery dates, everything set up perfect. I would say that the majority of artists I know in matte painting and concept art and most of the pipeline positions can take something to about 80%. I think riggers have to take it to 100%, right?
Yeah.
But matte painting is that area, right? Like, I don't know anybody that does a matte painting that takes a matte painting to 80% and hands it off. Like, you've got to get it to perfection, right?
Yep, you do. Yeah, and matte painting is so broad. There's so many types of it. Like sometimes you're just putting in a mountain. Sometimes you're just putting in a sky. Sometimes you're doing every single inch of the shot. It really depends. And that's one of the great things about matte painting is it's broad, and almost every single TV show, film, whatever, has an environment, right? Not every single TV show has a character, or that needs character design, etc. So to me, when I was first starting out, not only was really intrigued by matte painting in general, but it seemed to me the most likely avenue to stay continuously working, because almost every single project needed a matte painting, right?
Right.
So that was part of the allure for me when I first started out. I said, oh, I can do this and always be working. Which, when you're first starting out in the field as an artist, there's always a question: Am I going to work? Is this a real thing? Can I actually make money with artwork? And the answer is yes. You just need to be committed and willing to do what it takes to be good, because nothing about being a professional artist is easy, or at least it wasn't for me, and it shouldn't be for anyone. You should earn your position, right?
Right. Well, and you mentioned something good about, it sounds like you were ahead of the game very early on, even in school, coming from Fort Lauderdale, understanding that if I'm going to make it, I'm going to need a network base, I'm going to need a friend base, that you had a support structure. And it sounded like at the same time you were searching for work or building your portfolio, you were building that knowledge base or that connection base, which, if you come out here to LA, I think it's a little easier than what it used to be as far as, getting your foot in the door. But you definitely need to know people. And the reason why, from my point of view, that you need to know people, I always tell someone, is that it's not so much about having to know a bunch of people to get in the door from the point of view of like, oh well, you have to be a buddy, but you don't find out about the jobs, because if I need a character artist, if I need a matte painter, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the rest of the guys in the art department and say, we need a character guy. Who do you know?
Exactly.
We need a matte painter. Who do you know? Right. And, well, I know this guy, he does concepts, but he's not exactly, a matte painter. Show me his work. Let me see what it looks like. If we bring him in, can we get him to the point he needs to be, or is he just going to be able to do these loose sketches?
Yep.
And you've built up your freelance career through that. And you're saying that, as you said, you always have that fear of like where the next job comes from. I think that it's smart to tell students coming up that feeling doesn't really ever go away that much, does it? Even as a professional with 10 years, that's part of the stress
Yep.
of freelance. And with
It
your
it is.
studio, with people that you support, what level of stress does that bring? What was that? How has that experience been for you?
Well, it's definitely changed over the years. It's, I can definitely say it was a lot more stressful when I first started my company, because there was no proven history of me succeeding to lean on. But now, as I progressed more over the past decade, it is easier because I have a wider clientele base, but there is no guarantee that you're going to get work all the time. So that's why networking is so critical. Is you need to have 30 contacts in order to have 2 consistent jobs, right?
Right.
So that's part of. I mean, we could spend this whole lesson talking about the importance of networking. It is critical. And like I want to give one linear example of just how networking helped me, just for anyone listening. For instance, when I was in college, my next door neighbor lived right next to me. We became buddies. We were in the same school. We trained together. We'd help each other learn. He got a job at Rhythm and Hughes, and then he helped me get my first job that lasted for 3 days. So
Wow.
I drove all the way from Miami to California in 2.5 days, which was insane, to work for 3 days. So my friend got me my first job, right? So then that job turned into a 3-year job, and about a year into that job, another one of my friends who I went to school with, I got him a job at Rhythm and Hughes. Boom. So I returned the favor, got him the job. Well, randomly, about 12 years after that, this same person was working at Bad Robot, and they had just announced that they were doing a Star Trek theme ride. So anyway, he brought me on, introduced me to everyone as a matte painter. And during this interview process was when they announced that J.J. Abrams was going to do Star Wars. So, during the interview, I dropped that and was like, I'm really interested in this. So because I got my friend a job, he got me a job on Star Wars. So it's all about networking and helping your friends, because eventually they'll return the favor and get you the job that might end up being your dream job. So that's why networking is so critical. It pays to have good friends, it pays to be a good friend, and it pays to be in that pool of friendship and networking. It's not mandatory, but it will certainly help you.
And I love the fact that you said it pays to be a good friend, because I think right now that just about every kid coming up, every adult looking to move out of a mediocre studio into a better studio understands that you need to network and you need to make friends. But a lot of people are still doing it with a selfish desire, right? Like, I want you to help me, but I have nothing to offer.
Yep.
And that's, one of the reasons why we're doing these things here is just to kind of help raise awareness of like, look, if you want to take advantage of a network, be a good network. If, you're looking for people to help you, start out by helping somebody. And a lot of people say, well, how do I do that? Like, I don't have a job, I'm not working. And my response to that is that, there's always somebody that needs a hand. There's always people with side projects. You've got a few side projects that we'll start talk about here in just a few minutes. Now, I wanted to jump just quickly, because one of the things when I was at school that came up often was, don't put monsters in a portfolio. If you're doing a matte painting, don't put a castle on a hillside. Um, and my thing was, well, put monsters in your portfolio, but don't call something that has a lack of anatomy knowledge a monster just because you want to call it a monster, right? People are
Yeah.
just tired of seeing, meatballs called monsters. Put some anatomy in there, get some reference. Um, with a castle on a hillside, put it in your reel or not. I've got my opinion on it, but I wanted to hear from an actual matte painter.
Well, well, I mean, if it looks amazing, put it in your portfolio. If if you're putting a castle on a hill just to have a castle on a hill, leave it out. Uh, I mean
Great
that
advice.
is that is definitely funny because that is a very easy intro map painting, especially because there's a lot of tutorials out there that have that.
Right.
So it's a great first map painting because it takes two things. It takes that you'll always need. It takes terrain, which you're always going to need, and it takes geometric structures like a castle that you're always going to need. And it's a great first lesson. And if it looks awesome, use it. But if if you're just doing it to do it, I would say maybe move on to a sci-fi building on a hill.
Here we go. Nice castle on a
Just to break
hillside.
it up.
Beautiful image. Well, and
Yep.
the reason why I talk to students and I tell people, I'm like, take all the advice you can, but then apply it to you. And what you just did was amazing. Is like anything that you do a really amazing job is going to break the rule of somebody telling you. And my thing was, well, yeah, always put a castle on a hillside just because every single map painter I've ever met has a castle or an awesome sci-fi building on a hillside. And it's, people
Yep.
hire you for what they're going to ask you to do. And as a map painter, that's definitely going to be something somebody asks you to do. Uh,
Oh yeah. Big.
these are great images. Um,
Yep.
Now, the other thing that you have going on here that I love in your portfolio too is, shots like these. My advice to anybody, and this is not, obviously I want to talk about your art direction, the other things you do. I don't want to stay on matte painting too long, but one of the things I always give advice to artists coming up is if you want to be a matte painter, then start looking at studios' portfolio reels. Because if you take a look at studios' portfolio reels, Digital Domain, Bad Robot, whoever it may be, you're always going to see these shots with characters with their back to the camera. And anytime there's a character with a back to the camera, that's going to be a matte painted shot, a composite shot, right? And you have a bunch of
That's
you're the first matte painter that I've seen that puts this in their portfolio, which is really cool and useful for guys that are trying to come up. Like, this shot's great, right?
yep.
And how often do you do basically like comp shots like this, just dropping matte paintings in the background versus like full environments? Is it kind of a throw
It
up?
really. I think it really depends. I think you're more prone to do full environment shots when you're working in a facility because
Okay.
typically the way that producers split out the work is they'll take a shot that, if there's one environment that has 30 shots in it, they'll do that in-house because they can control all the variables and one ties another, one hand leads to another, etc. It's usually the one-offs or the shot that you only see 3 or 4 times or 2 times that they outsource. So I would say the majority of the big shots that have 20 or so shots and the camera's moving around like crazy in them, those will most likely be done by a team of people because it sort of requires it. So as a freelance map painter, you're more likely to get one-offs like, oh, here's an establishing shot. Here's a mountain as a car drives by this hill. Boom, boom, boom. So a lot of map painting freelance work will be the one-offs, will be the easier shots. They can outsource them, give them to a pro, have it done easy, quick, and they'll leave the big giant shots that you need to chew on for a month in-house. As a general rule of thumb, that's not always the case, but that's
Right.
kind of what I've experienced recently.
So I think this is a good transition point to just kind of jump into, with textures, if you learn photography or you pick up a good camera, you make yourself more valuable and you kind of give yourself a pay raise and over the long run because you're out there shooting your own textures, you're building a big library. A lot of the best artists I've hired have been the artists with the biggest reference libraries, to be honest.
Yeah.
And none
Yes.
of that stuff. There's almost none of it from the bigger names, quote unquote, that is coming straight out of Google Images. I know Dylan, his reference folder is like terabytes at this point. And tree branches, here's 3,000 of them. Now
Hmm.
I do know plenty of guys like that are out there doing this stuff are going to stock photos as well. It's just easier to go. You don't mess with the copyright. Um, but you take your own photography. You're doing kind of a new thing with that photography. Um, I'd love to talk about that. I'd love to show some of the photographs. You just recently took a trip to Iceland, correct?
Yep, I did. I've been there twice. Went there in November 2017, and then I was there in May this year, 2018.
Now I'm
So I
curious.
got to see Icelandic winter and an Icelandic spring, and it's dynamic. I can tell you that much.
I was gonna say, how addictive is that? Is it like almost like you get back and you start preparing the next trip, or once you've been there a few times, you've kind of experienced it and you're ready to go somewhere else?
Well, I can definitely say specifically Iceland. That place is a matte painting. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. It's just one giant matte painting. Every single place you go there is phenomenal looking. It's these amazing landscapes that you've never seen before, or perhaps you've seen photo of. But it's so dynamic of a place, and weather is such an important part of what makes images look dynamic. It's something I discovered, and we'll talk about shortly.
Sure.
That Iceland is the weather. If you, there's a saying, if you don't like the weather in Iceland, wait 5 minutes, and that's true.
Nice.
So, and that's something that I really noticed when my first trip there was just what an important role weather and weather affects sunlight, because cloud cover, just what an important role weather plays in making an image look like a matte painting, epic matte painting, or just a cool looking environment. And I definitely have some examples to show once we start digging into that of some things that I'm talking about. But
yeah, let me go ahead and switch over to your screen while we're talking, if that's okay.
Yeah, great. I'll go and do this now. Yeah, but on Iceland, anyone who's never been, I recommend, if you're a matte painter or just an environment painter, or you just appreciate awesome looking beauty, that's the spot for you, because it is wildly dynamic. Is my screen live right now?
You're live, yeah. And even as
okay, great.
Even as thumbnails, these look amazing. So.
Okay, all right, great. So I guess what really stood out the most to me in my trip, and especially someone I've been in Southern California for the past 16 years, so that basically means I have not been exposed to weather for the past 16 years.
So true.
Unless I travel, right? And just being there, witnessing the weather change 30 times a day, I'm like, oh my God, this is such an important variable in paintings, right? And not only is sun critical, is lighting critical, but lighting is typically there for half the day in most of the world. But in Iceland, that's not the case. For instance, in winter, the sun never rises up to the 12 o'clock position ever. So it's always at kind of magic hour. It means it's low on the horizon because of Iceland's proximity to our position on the planet, right? It's so high north. So the sun never hits high noon ever. So that means it's always golden hour when the sun is out. Now, it's only out for 6 hours a day, but when it's out, it's sunset, sunrise all day, and it is glorious, right? So you'll get some moments where the cloud cover breaks, like this image here we're looking at now, right?
Right.
It was super rainy. We're kind of, oh, bummed, I can't shoot any photos. And like 2 minutes later, boom, the sun pops out, and you got this glorious looking pocket in the sky with the light shining through, and it just creates this amazing looking image just because of the weather, right?
Yeah.
So
beautiful diffusion glow.
Yep. And so, you can see how the atmospheric depth in this little chunk right here, just the difference in the blacks from here to here is just pretty striking. But the way everything flows across this image is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yep. And I was there my most recent trip there was to do some photogrammetry, because we'll talk about this as we go, but we're about to create my business partner and I are launching a company we're doing photogrammetry, where we're using a mix of techniques to photograph and scan these terrains and sell them as 3D models. And we're about to launch in probably July and September. I can't give a ton of specifics just yet because we're still finalizing deals, but that will be out very soon. So the whole point of my second trip was to shoot essentially photogrammetry and scans, which for that, the best lighting condition is overcast, which was a perfect time for this second trip because it was overcast almost the entire time. So it was perfect for scanning, not the best for photos, but that's good for what we're doing. But one thing that I did notice, because it was overcast the whole time, is weather broke and would change so quickly.
Right.
That I started to notice a phenomena, and this is a great example. Let me open this up in Photoshop really quick. That I started noticing that almost every time I was looking at a mountain range, part of it would disappear. It would just go away. Like you notice here,
like a lost edge in a painting.
Yeah, it's just gone. Like where did this mountain go right here? Like what happened?
Right.
And that is a fantastic technique and trick to really give your environment some weather and some depth.
Right.
Not only is it right here, check out right here. Boom. So even this low lying cloud, like this, it just disappears and it goes away, right? And that's just a beautiful, subtle effect that, honestly, I mean, I've done it before in paintings, but I never really noticed how often it happens until this most recent trip. So that's just one of the amazing things that I picked up on. I'm like, oh wow, that I'm always seeing mountains disappear, and I'll do that in my paintings from now on when I get back, right? So.
Right.
Every time I saw it, I tried to find one, and I think this might be one of my favorites. It's so subtle, and it's way off in the horizon, and all it takes is a little bit of boop, 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 and then your mountain's covered up. And sometimes this might look funky, like, oh, it looks like another mountain on there. Well, it's real, and it is what it is, right? So weather is such a critical thing, and making cool stuff like that I never really noticed. I mean, let's be honest, how many times in Southern California do you see this?
Right. Well, right? It's one of those moments.
You don't.
It's one of those moments that's you discover, you find out, what you don't know, right? That's why I'm always pushing people to get away from Google Images as a reference and get out there in the real world. I think Eric Tiemens was the one that told me when I asked him about, how do you always come up with ideas? Do you ever stare at a blank canvas and just not have anything? And, he's like, I do plein air paintings on, I've done a plein air painting on the side of a hill while there's a forest fire, and you notice how the fire burns coral pink, not red, and you have ashes falling into your paint, and you can smell it, and you can go back to that moment, and you're never faced with a blank canvas. And like the picture that you just showed,
oh wow,
like you might catch that. Like you might catch that it's doing that if you find the right Google image, if you're looking for that mountain, right? But more than likely, that's something from standing there, and as you said, just noticing it happening over and over is catching your attention and saying this is important. And that is awesome because, like I said, it makes it just look like an oil painting. Like you get that lost edge in there, which gives it so much depth.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, yeah, it's a cool shot.
That's a great story. Actually, I've never heard that. That's I really like the fire ash angle. It's always embedded in your brain now.
Yeah.
and embedded in your painting as well.
Yeah, well, I imagine that there's smells and there's a feeling of cold and there's a wind and as you said, like sometimes just being in that overcast environment, I feel like Iceland has to be beautiful or everyone would commit suicide. Because it seems to always be kind of overcast and cloudy, but it's gorgeous, right?
Yep. And here's another example where if I were to put, like, these clouds are just completely gone, right?
Right.
And if I were to throw this into a shot, no, I want to see the mountains. It doesn't look real. Something looks funny. Something looks wrong. I feel like as a visual effects soup is always going to be the hurdle to get your shot out. I feel like a lot of times they're afraid to take risks on making things look different. And this to me is a perfect example of just like this looks really funny to me, but it's real, right? Like you see this guy just barely disappearing and this little bank's right here and it kind of is blown out up top. And I think it would be incredibly hard for me to try and pass this by as a painting, just because it looks funky.
Yeah, that would be my next question is how many of these things that you experience in real life are so unique when you're in Iceland or when you go to a location, how many of them are so unique that, as you said, you just can't get away with them in a shot because even if you get it past the VFX soup, somebody watches a movie and they don't realize it. Like, is it a risk to do that or do you just push it so that you have a unique look?
Yeah, and that's definitely something I was thinking about, and because my business partner who I went with, he's a matte painter, concept artist as well, and we were talking the whole time. Oh, there's no way you'd put that in a shot; it'll never get past. Burp, burp, burp.
Right.
So, taking risks is one thing, right? But also, doing something unique is another. Here's a really good example. Let me pop this one open right here. Let me get the 8K one. Okay, so here's an example of exactly this, what I was just talking about. So this right here. no one would ever allow you to put this in your shot because it's just so funny looking. I mean, it looks like its own mountain range, kind of, right? Like
Yeah.
if you were to not know, this big cloud shape could feel like a massive mountain range,
Even
right?
matter somebody
But
who hasn't used very many volumetrics. I mean, it's
yeah,
tough. That's
but
cool though.
yeah, I mean, but just the shape of this cloud alone, like, I mean, what kind of cloud does that,
Right.
right? It's so funny, and I would never ever in my life have thought to put that in a shot like that. And I don't know that anyone would actually let me because it just looks so unique. And that's the thing about weather is you never know what you get. And this is another great example of Iceland weather. This was a super cloudy day, and then all of a sudden the wind just got us in the right moment, and we found this amazing valley that had this beautiful, beautiful cloud cover over it. And right here is what I really love about this image, is that just look how things just disappear, right? It's just gone. Like, where does it go? It's a cloud floating in. Now, granted, if someone wanted to see a distant mountainscape, you might not want to have this because you can't really see the mountains. But to me, this is awesome. Like, it says mountain, it says this place actually exists, because what lunatic would paint that, right? Is it might look funny, and it does look strange, but it looks awesome. It's real. And this is just another example of weather really setting the tone, you
Well, and
know?
if I was art directing this piece, I think I would get in trouble because if you could just stay right where you are, how do you have a cloud like that and have the bottom of the mountain fully lit? So,
Exactly.
I guess it goes back to the sun staying at a low angle, as you said. But I would, if somebody put a painting in front of you like that, a matte painting, and you'd never gone to Iceland before, you'd look at that mountain to the right and say, well, you got this huge cloud over it. How's that much sun breaking through? I mean, it looks wrong, but
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like another great little thing, like how this clearly this, I don't know if you can see my, there we go.
Yeah.
Clearly this is in front of us because the light right here is being splashed there, right? So there's just these great little things that just stand out, like, oh wow, I would have never thought to do that,
Yeah.
right? So it just studying weather is something that just really stood out in my trip, and it's something I'm still been thinking about. I'm still literally processing all this data that we shot over 2 terabytes, but I'm still processing it mentally. Like what does this mean, and how can I incorporate this lesson that I learned on this trip into my new paintings? Obviously not going something wild like this, because this would never get passed. I think this was the example where we were both making fun of ourselves, saying we could never put this in a shot because no one would ever let us.
Right.
But it's real. This is a real cloud bank, and it looks funny, but it is what it is.
Well, I recall Pete Koenig having me do a clay character for the first time. I started out as a modeler, and he had me do like an 18-inch figure in clay, I think it was, or and as I was working on the arm, one hand was closed, one hand was open, based off of Andrew Carson's anatomy tools. And I thought, I'd been modeling for 5 years. I thought up until then I was a pretty decent modeler. And when I was working in clay, I was like, I know nothing, right? I was like,
Yeah.
the forearm
Yeah.
changes so much from having the hand open versus the hand closed. And I left that experience going, I never want to hire another modeler that doesn't have clay experience. If somebody comes in and has clay sculpture experience, they're ahead of the game. Leaving
Oh
ice
yeah.
with the experience you have. And I only bring this up because it's so important to people understanding portfolios, that portfolio is your ticket to the dance, but the interview gets you the job. And I imagine if you're talking to somebody as a matte painter to bring into the studio, or just it's a general artist coming into the studio, somebody with that travel, somebody with that life experience, especially somebody who's been somewhere you haven't been yet, that's got advice or knowledge that they can bring to the table. How much does that contribute to your desire to bring them on? Does that bump them up a notch or two? Does it matter at all? What's that? What does it?
I would say it bumps them up or two in two different tiers. One, because just being well traveled, you're a more broad human, because you've been to a new place, you've seen something new, you've not been able to speak the language, you've eaten the wrong food, you've gotten sick, you've gotten lost. That makes you a more well-rounded human. Boom, tier one.
Right.
So tier two would be, oh, this person has been there, they understand weather, they probably got trapped out in it a couple times, and they really understand weather now because they were frozen, half frozen for a day, and they got to see 17 weather changes in one day. So I would think in two categories it bumps you up. You're more experienced human, and you've probably seen something that will help you in your job. So I would say it's a huge plus. And both as a human and both as an artist, for sure.
So timing,
Right.
yeah, that's amazing breakdown too. Timing wise, I just took a trip this past weekend down or on 89, going from basically through Utah to Lake Powell in Arizona, and we took 3 days just to go plan doing photographs, literally along 89 because there's just so much great stuff to be shot. And the funny thing is that 89 is like this, probably there's probably like 120 200 mile stretch along there that like every 15 miles has something great to stop and take a picture of. I want to do a workshop there, but the problem with doing a workshop there, and the only reason I bring this up is the problem with doing a workshop is you literally have like a 30-minute window at night and a 30-minute window in the morning where like is glorious looking. Not just magic hour, but just like the diffusion, the way that you get a glow, the way that the color changes off the rock structures. Um, like it was so pretty the first day just scouting out. My girlfriend's asleep, and like I always want to wake her up every 5 minutes. I take her out the next morning at the same time, hoping to get that same light. And I'm like, you don't understand. Yesterday it looked like clouds in like heaven, and today it just looks like red and brown and white rocks.
Yep, yep, yep. And again, this is an example of weather setting
right,
the tone, right? So
yeah,
it's just cloud systems, weather, lighting conditions. Like for instance, here, this is a great example of something that I shot that I loved. That is, it's busy. It's super busy because there's a lot going on, but there's also a lot to talk about because of it, right? Say for
right,
instance, here we have this shadow here is a direct shadow from this piece right here, right? But this shadow right here is a couple things. This part of the shadow is this right here being cast on it, but this diffuse lighting right here is coming from a cloud, right? So it's partially cloud shadow right here and partially cast shadow from terrain right here. So you can see the diffusion right here. This is a little bit brighter because the cloud isn't as thick that's casting the shadow. Here, the shadow is super dense because it's the terrain that's casting the shadow. So just this example alone is such a beautiful thought of how weather truly affects an image. Not only do we have sunlighting, we have cloud dappling going on. And you can see the difference. Like you can see this is not quite as, or the shadow is less diffused than it is right here, because this is a cloud casting shadow and not a terrain casting shadow. So just something that's just random. I saw it and I was like, oh my God, look at this. It's beautiful. Now, again, this is another example of this would never make it into a painting because it's so busy. Like it's, whoa, where do I look? It's so much going on. Yeah, it is, but that's life,
well,
that's
it's a great
reality.
example of stopping painting and taking time to analyze a picture too, because in that picture you got pink clouds. Like that's a mostly white image, but there's a lot of color in it. They say we did a trick snowboarding where I never paid attention to it before, but somebody said to me, they're like, white really screws with you. If you've got orange snowboarding goggles, he goes, it literally takes your brain about 7 minutes to actually turn the snow white again. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, because your brain knows the snow's white, and the way that your vision works is that looking through those orange goggles, 7 minutes in, you see snow as white, even though you're looking through an orange filter. And you put it on, and if you pay attention, you notice. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. That's really trippy. So like that previous image that you had up, I'd love to see you color pick it, just because there's probably 30 different shades of color that are not white in that image. There's probably very little white at all in there, I imagine.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you can even see here, like this is a giant glacier, right? That's coming off the mountain. Boom, it's melting down. It's a huge glacier,
Okay.
and it's coming down. So you can even see the color variation in the ice itself. So like here's ice chunk. It has no snow. Well, there's snow. So you got snow, you got ice, and you also have snow and ice mixed with a different lighting condition. This ice right here has a subtle diffuse from the cloud, and this ice right here probably is more direct shadow from the terrain. So not only do you get a lot of variation, you get variation from different lighting conditions, some from a direct shadow, some from a diffuse shadow. So the color picker would go wild in this image. You're correct on that one.
and one question is, what's the difference between just going and shooting and looking for an amazing landscape photo and shooting for reference or shooting for information?
This is a great question, because it's totally different. For instance, when I'm shooting for kind of two things. The first thing I do, if it's a magical moment, I'll pop that moment just so I have it as a landscape photographer. Beautiful image, I want it, keep it, boom. But then when I shoot for a matte painting, what I would do, for instance, is if this were my scene, right? What I'd probably do, I'd probably zoom in right here. and I would shoot this. Boom, I pan, shoot, pan, shoot, pan, shoot. So I can get super high res detail out of this guy, and I could always zoom in and have my detail. And what I do when I'm done with that is, I think I have an example here. Yeah, this guy. So this guy in the original image is 38K,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And so what this is only 8K JPEG, but the original raw was 48K. So I would typically zoom in and shoot chunks of it so I can go in and stitch it later. And I zoom in more, and I think more about how would I use this in a painting? What would a matte painter want versus what would a landscape photographer want?
Right.
Right. And there is a difference, because I'm not going to want to have the same things that a landscape photographer will have. I want to have more assets, right, than a beautiful image. I want chunks of mountains, because it's incredibly rare when you take an entire image and pop it into matte painting. Oh, I'm done.
Right.
You're taking the mountain and putting it in against 7 other mountain ranges and popping it in, and then you're done. So you're shooting more for assets, less for images, if that comes through properly.
Now that's helpful for me too, because I'm new to all of this, and one of the first things I do is go with a wide angle, 18 millimeter, 24 millimeter, 35 millimeter, and I've found that one of the cheaper lenses I have is a 100 to 400 zoom that I got for wildlife photography up in Wyoming, Utah, and places like that for horse ranches and stuff, or wild horses. And I find I use the 100 to 400 zoom almost exclusively. I got an 80 millimeter Sigma that's just crystal clear, beautiful for cheap, like $900.
Yeah.
But as you said, when I go out, I'd love to try to get the environment piece, but I feel like the only photos I really enjoy that much when I bring back are the ones I zoom in tight. What kind of equipment are you using? What's your go-to lenses? And then, what kind of camera pixels are you dealing with? What kind of camera or whatever?
This brings up sort of a two-pronged conversation, but I'll give you my gear first.
Sure.
And then I'll go back to the secondary part. Right now I'm shooting on a Fuji X2, or sorry, a Fuji X-T2, and I have a wide angle and an 18 to 55, and I'm also shooting on a Canon X2, I believe. So I only shot with it a little bit. I only tested it out my last round.
Really?
And then we're shooting with our Mavic drones. But this will lead me into the second part of this conversation. Is in Iceland, because the weather changes so much and so fast that you don't have a lot of setup time.
Right.
It's usually, there it is, shoot it, pop, 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 because quite literally, we drove around the entire island. Or yeah, I guess an island's the right word for that. It's huge, but we drove around the whole thing, and literally every 5 minutes, stop! You just stop in the middle of the road and start shooting. And half the time we're shooting from in the car, because it's super windy, the wind's blowing, trying to knock you down. You've already stopped 35 times that day, so let's just shoot real quick and get going. Right. You
got crisp shots though. I mean, are you shooting handheld, or you have to set your tripod up each time, or just get it if
typically,
you get it?
Typically what I would do is, this is a handheld actually, but what I started to do is I would just fold the tripod legs up and throw it in the back of the car.
Right.
And just so you have to do is grab the tripod with the camera already on it, unfold the legs, set your settings, and then pop, pop, pop. Because especially, when you're driving all day and you're trying to make a deadline, you don't want to stop for 20 minutes so you can, I got the perfect moment. And by the time you've done that, the weather has changed and your lighting is gone. So for instance, this image is a great example. This is not necessarily a weather related image. It's just a lighting related image. And this, quite literally, this right here lasted about 35 seconds, maybe a minute at the most. Because the sun was coming down. I was like, oh my God, look at that tight little light. And then it was so beautiful. I took like 1 or 2 shots, and by the time I looked up from looking down at my camera to see how the image looked, it was gone. So that's something else about shooting on the go, is that it's quick, and you don't get the time that you would like to have, especially in Iceland, because it's so fast and things happen so quickly and so fast that the weather just changes.
Wow, look at that shot.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is another great example of weather. This is a little blurry in some areas, but how diffuse things can be, and how, like, for instance, here you have the wind slowly undulating. This looks blurrier than what it is. This is actually wind blowing up the snow, right? So it's kicking off the snow on the face of the mountain, creating this kind of funky little foggy kind of haze thing. And again, if you were to try to add this in your painting, and it looks soft, looks blurry, bark, bark, bark. and it would never work, right?
Yeah.
But it's real and it happens. And of course, if you were in a painting, you want it to move, so you probably would never add this as a flat layer. You'd want someone to, add some turbulence to it.
Yeah,
But
it
again,
takes a minute to see the horizon on this one to figure out is that
yeah,
the top of the snow mount, or is that the cloud rolling in, or is what's going on? So
exactly. Yeah, this is a giant glacier just running down towards the sea here, and just happened to get that right moment where this guy's just getting blasted right here. I mean, it's a beautiful lighting condition, and literally this only lasted another couple minutes and it was out. Right. So
that's that mountain on the left though, man, what a nice effect. I mean, the roundness of the texture, like the way the texture rhythm is just pulling through there, that's beautiful, man.
yeah, it's definitely, there were some very, very amazing moments. And there's one other funky little thing that I found yesterday when hunting that I wanted to show. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so this I thought was really strange. It looks like this mountain's leaking. Like, it looks like to me, let me jack the value here a little bit so you can see it maybe a little bit better. There we go. So it looks to me like this mountain's just leaking, like burp, like the wind's just pushing this thing off. And it's such a weird little effect, right? I mean, I would never in a million years put this in a painting, but it's awesome. It looks cool. It looks real. And like even some of this looks funny. Like look at the value here. It doesn't look real.
Yeah.
Right. It's strange. It's strange. I would have never in a million years thought to put this in an image, but it's real. And it looks like the mountain is just being blown away. Like, so yeah, it's just funny stuff, man. Weather does awesome stuff. That was definitely the thing that I took from this whole trip was weather really does make things epic.
Yeah.
Or not. And like for instance here, we got a couple really cool things going on here. We have our mountain disappearing just barely, just subtly. Like, for instance, it's not down this low. It's only at the very top. So it's a great effect. The mountains just whoop. Hey, I'm in the painting. I'm gone. You have all these, or I'm in the clouds. I'm gone. You have this great light dappling right here, but then you have this amazing cast shadow that comes down. Oop, hey, guy. We have this amazing cast shadow that covers the entire part of the frame. And what this does, this makes your eye immediately go right here to the area most contrast. So for me, my eye pops right here every single time because you got the really dark darks and the really light lights. And for instance, this is a great example to say, if your subject matter was a little house right here, right?
Right.
That's where you should have your area of highest contrast. You should have your little house right here because you got the super darks behind it and you got the light right here, and your eye goes exactly right here as soon as I look at the image, right? So this to me is a great example of how to use lighting and weather to frame your subject, right? Because you don't really pay attention to anything down here because it's all in shadow, right? And you don't really look over here because it's black. What you look for is kind of the highest contrast, which will be right here in this area and this area. So this would be a great place for your subject. So that's something else that you can use weather to do, is to help frame your subject.
I was shooting these charcoal. There's some charcoal like sand. They're not sand dunes. I don't know what the material is, but it looks like moon material if you can picture that. And there's this big zone up in Utah that you can go shoot. And I was having a blast, but going crazy because I was hoping to get it in with clouds, because when the clouds come, the gray turns black. And without the clouds, it's like a white gray like the moon. And so you have these different dunes. And as soon as the light dapples, you have like white and black and gray. And it just looks amazing. I definitely love to pay you and have you do a workshop with us and figure that out. We'll figure that out later. But what are you going to do with these images, and how are you guys going to be selling them? Are you going to just sell these raw as kits, or are you going to, like, what's your plan as far as what you're doing in July with all this stuff? Or is this stuff a part of that, or is what you're doing in July something different?
It's a combination. Okay. We will be selling all of our reference photos as well.
Okay.
So I can't give too many specifics now. I can just kind of tell you what's coming, because we're still waiting for the ink to dry. But what we're going to do is we're going to be selling all of our photo reference as reference packets. Like we'll probably have 6 or 7 Iceland packs that will kind of be a snow pack, a lava rock pack, a dusk pack, a sunset pack, and so we'll probably split them up into chunks. Gotcha. But more importantly, what we're doing is we're doing a lot of photogrammetry and terrain scans. And we're doing this with a proprietary workflow we have. And I can't say too much about that either, but essentially we're able to capture very large land masses and build high-res 3D models out of them. And we're going to be offering the models, the textures, high, medium, and low resolution. And we're probably, I would say, about 75% done processing them all, and they are amazing. So definitely every environment artist will want to have these in their toolkit for sure. And just stay tuned to my Facebook page and all that stuff, and I'll be posting links about it soon. But we'll be offering full 3D scans of terrains and image packs, and we're also going to be selling a lot of ZBrush brushes and alpha brushes that we're generating from these photos. So we're going to have a ton of rock brushes, mountain brushes, all kinds of terrain brushes and things like that we're going to sell once we officially launch July, September.
I don't think you're going to have to market much. I mean, I'm willing to sight unseen buy everything. So, and I think anybody that does environments is smart enough to realize that as well. And hopefully one of the things people get from this too is, how relevant, how important it is to pick up not necessarily just the hobbies. I'm curious if this started as a hobby or if this started as a necessity for work or a little bit of both, but how important it is to pick up work outside the studio, not just kind of grind on the same thing you're doing in the studio, but find ways to get out there and educate yourself and outside of it. How did you get into doing this period? Was it just, hey, this is going to make my work better, I'm going to go do this? Or was it a hobby, or were you sent on a job?
It's a combination of both, or actually all three. In November, I got a job for the NFL that was all set in Arctic winter wasteland. So then it was November, and I was like, hey, let's just go to Iceland. I've always wanted to go. I can shoot as many plates as we need. I shot a lot of drone footage and all the stuff that we use for the shoot itself. And it was kind of on this trip where I'm like, you know what? I need to travel more. I'm always in front of a computer. I've learned so much just by being here about environments and about, basically what I explained about the weather. I learned so much on the trip. Why don't I do this more? Why don't I try and make something more out of it? And that's the same time I discovered the photogrammetry techniques that we're doing. So it was a kind of a combination of the two. And my original goal was just to shoot a ton of reference from Iceland, because I've been using Iceland reference for about 12 years now and always wanted to go.
Right.
And just part of it was, I learned so much. Part of it was, why not travel and make a little money on the back end? And then 3 is I really enjoy the tech, right? It's really fun. And I think learning is a big part of it. And, like things that make your painting better. And here's a really small, subtle example, but this is something that will make it so intelligent and so awesome when you really think about it. Okay, this image, right? Super simple, just a mountain, right? But one amazing little feature. You see this mist right here? Well, that's because there's an ocean on this side of the frame, okay. Right? Now, for instance, there's no mist right here. Well, because there's no ocean over there. So the bay kind of stops like right here. So what a clever way to show there's an ocean nearby. Just have a tiny little bit of mist, just popping in, just right there and only there to show, oh, there's a bay. So you can suggest that there's a bay without even showing there's a bay. Right. What a beautiful tool. Right? It's just little things like that I understood, never really thinking about, but now I'm going to incorporate that in my painting. So anytime I have a mountainscape near a bay, near water, I'm going to put a little bit of mist right here. And then that will subconsciously alert your mind, if you're trained, oh, there's a bay there, there's some water there, or there's it doesn't have to be water, but more often than not, you're going to get low-lying mist near water. Right. Right? Yeah. So just that little observation, something you can use in your work.
Yeah, so, you're basically painting the entire time you're out there taking photographs, right? Particularly,
exactly.
Like that's the thing, and that's I'm really happy that we can share that from your experience, because just picking up, and I sound like a commercial, but just picking up these images or just photographing any of your own images and spending 20, 30 minutes breaking down an image and taking note of what's relevant and what's happening is as valuable as watching a DVD, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something that this trip really inspired me to do, was re-examine images you see and think harder about them. Like, what is that? Like, at the time, I didn't really notice this effect. It was only when I got home, I said, it's a great little effect. I'm like, oh, that's right. This is on a bay. Wow, It's something that's a great attribute that water has that would be super easy to incorporate in a painting. It gives it history. It gives it a rich, environment over things you don't even see, like you can't even see the bay. So, but subconsciously, it's there. So just little things like that that I'm so grateful that I went just for these little things to make my paintings better next time, right? And to top it off, I have amazing reference now. So yeah, it's a win-win for that.
Well, we're right at an hour, and rather than try to do 2 or 3 gallery picks, let's just maybe find one and give some advice. But is there anything else that we didn't cover or hit that that you wanted to just kind of highlight before we move on to doing a quick critique or a quick advice?
No, I think I covered most of the things I want to talk about. And just, if anyone has any questions, add me on social media, ask me, and I'll definitely get back to you. My schedule's a little tight. Just, be patient while I take a little time to get back to you. But ask me any questions you have. Happy to help. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, Travis, for everything like that too. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, and we'll definitely give you a boost when you do get whatever's released. Let us know, and we'll push it through all of our network and make sure that we create some awareness for it. Because I think, as I said, I don't think you're going to need a whole lot of advertising, but getting the word out is important. And that's one of those things that I mentioned at the beginning or halfway through is that, a lot of students or a lot of younger artists are like, well, I don't have anything to offer. I'm just a student. I'm always telling everybody that shows up, there's some great artists in here that have been coming to a lot of these that we've done, and I've built some friendships with now. Anytime you help us advertise our classes, you're doing me a favor, and you're making me remember your name. So, same thing with Nick or any other artist is that, whether it's, running on a trip to go shoot photography and help with gear, whether it's just, sharing that Nick's got some stuff coming out and, he sees that in your Facebook and is like, hey man, thanks. That's cool. Those are some of the things that you can do, just to make somebody remember your name and kind of not necessarily owe you one, but just like, hey, that's cool. I remember when you give me a hand. Let me return that favor. And I think that that's something that guys like Nick that, I don't know you that well, Nick, but I'm going to just go ahead and guess. And guys like myself, I think we're all pretty good if you make it far in this industry at, returning favors or making sure to take care of people.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
So you pulled up a few images already. Do you want to go ahead and just tell us some thoughts on them?
Yeah. I just grabbed 2 images off the CG award page, and just 2 that kind of stood out. Like this one is awesome. like this is great weather, great mood. I love the lighting condition. I mean, the sky is a tiny bit busy, but it's atmosphere. It has enough atmosphere in it to send it back and not really compete as much with everything else. But a beautiful image. I love the mood. I love the tone. I absolutely love this little reflective guy, because to me the contrast is the coolest, because you have this Greek looking columns, old world looking columns. You have this amazing sci-fi little piece, little alien head, and then some sci-fi buildings. So there's a lot of contrast in here that I really like. And it's just a well thought out piece. I've never seen, I've heard of Stephen Corman. I haven't seen a ton of his work. I just found it today, and this piece is awesome. It has a cool little story. This alien guy is leading them, and hey, welcome to Planet Floston, whatever. Here's your little pod. Hop in, and it'll take you to your hotel, whatever. Nice. It's cool. It's a great image. I really dig that one.
I think Steven just started posting on the site. I think a few weeks ago, he dropped quite a few great pieces. So and that's the thing. It's like we will remember your name. We will you post around to different websites to get your name out there, and if you put up solid work, your name will stick.
Yep, for sure. So that's kind of the first one, and this one is the second one I found, and I absolutely love it. This is so cool, man. I just like how, my favorite thing is how the ship is meant to be here, right? Like it fits right in this crevice. And before, it took me like 5 minutes of just staring at this and being like, awesome, to realize there's another one over here. Like, holy crap, there's a whole fleet of these things. I don't know how big is this monstrous device? I don't know. But then it's just cool. I love this image. I love the design. It's all hand drawn. I can see a lot of little, imperfections here, which are, make it look awesome. This guy's got a lot of patience, or a lot of Adderall one. I don't know.
Remy took a class with me last year, and he just hammers through things. He likes to throw detail all over everything, and he's got a good sense.
I can see it.
And
I can see it.
he's somebody to keep an eye on for the next few years. I think there's some fundamental
Yep.
things he needs to work on, but other than that, he's got
Oh,
an eye for interesting shapes and forms, and he doesn't have a problem
yeah.
just hammering away. So
This is
Remy, if you
great.
end up
This is,
listening to this, good job, buddy.
yeah, I love it. All
Uh,
righty.
right on. Well,
That's kind of about it for me time wise. I gotta
yep.
pop off.
Yeah, let's get you out of here. Thank you so much, man. Super cool for you to take the time, give back, and to share with what you're doing. We'll keep an eye on you. Check out Nick's site and tune in here in an hour, guys, and we'll be talking to Rob McKinnon.
Oh,
Um,
yep.
Go ahead.
Just 1 second. I
Sure.
said I was going to share some reference.
Oh yeah.
Let me do that. Copy Dropbox link. Boom, boom, boom. And okay, guys, here's some Iceland ref.
Oh wow.
The only requirement is do not share that with anyone outside of this group. If you tune in, this is a tune in only. So the only way to get this should be to tune into this this little brief here.
Oh wow.
So keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself and enjoy it.
You just made 20 people happy and a couple hundred that are going to be super sad. Good job, man.
All right.
All right, Nick. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Take care, bud.
Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it. Thank you.